Freddy Krueger's Tales of Terror, Help Wanted, by David Bergantino. Chapter 8. Buck pulled the Datsun over to the side of the road with a screech. The hamburger in Laura's hands had by then flown against the windshield, where it stuck briefly and slid down, leaving a slimy trail of grease. Laura thrust her head out of her open window, choking and gagging. "What happened?" Buck asked as the car recoiled from its sudden stop. A roach, Laura choked out. "In my burger." Luckily, she had not eaten much all day and was only suffering from dry heaves. "A roach?" asked Buck, wide-eyed. "It was alive, too," Laura told him, her heart still racing, but starting to calm down. Then she chuckled bitterly. I guess Rain got me." "Rain? You mean you think she put a roach in your burger?" "Of course. She blames me for her breakup with Doug. He told me to watch out for her." Sorting it out helped Laura's breathing return to normal. "She caught me off guard, got me good, too." Suddenly she started laughing. Compared to all the truly serious things that had happened recently, a roach in a burger somehow seemed funny. Buck didn't think it was funny at all. He pulled the car into traffic suddenly, tires screeching. Making a dangerous U-turn, he headed back toward the big game burger. "What are you doing?" "We're going back to straighten out a certain person," Buck said, livid. "No, it's okay, Buck. It was just a little prank." Murder was in Buck's eyes. Laura didn't like it, and suddenly those eyes were on her. "So you're going to let yourself be bullied again?" His eyes narrowed to threatening slits. At first, Laura didn't answer. Then she gathered herself and said calmly, "No, I'm not letting myself get bullied." It was all she could do to return Buck's stare. Luckily, he had to turn away to watch the road. "Not by Rain, and certainly not by you. Now let's just get to the movie, okay? I'll deal with Rain later." Buck turned back to her once more. He looked ready to argue, but for once held his tongue. "Okay." But obviously he wasn't happy about turning the other cheek. At the next light, he made a legal U-turn, and they continued on their way to the movie theater. "You have quite a temper, don't you?" Laura ventured timidly. Instead of roaring at her, Buck laughed. "You ain't whistling Dixie," he responded. "I'm like my dad, but you managed to keep me in line. Mom never could keep Dad in line like that." "Keep you in line?" Laura asked, raising an eyebrow. "Hardly." "Sure. Any other girl would have let me go back there and start trouble." He seemed to remember a particular instance. "Believe me, it's happened," he told her cryptically. "But not with you. That's another reason I like you. You shame me into behaving." Buck was all smiles now, and Laura returned his smile. Hers was a little forced, but Buck didn't seem to notice. Luckily. As Buck was speaking, Laura had come to a decision that she hoped she would never have to voice. She would never become serious with Buck. He was too volatile, and she didn't want to be the catalyst responsible for his transformation. He was nice and all, but it was too much responsibility. What if it didn't work and he ended up worse off than he had been initially? He might even blame her for his failure to change. No, they could be friends, but nothing more. She hoped things would just turn out that way naturally. "Penny for your thoughts?" Buck asked after she had been quiet for some time. "Just thinking about the movie I want to see," she replied casually. "Anything you want," he said as he pulled into the parking lot. "As long as it's not a major chick flick." Laura was glad of this, at least. She didn't need a romantic movie in light of the decision she had just made. Ultimately, they decided on an action movie, with a romantic subplot. It was all harmless and a lot of fun, so that by the time the movie was over, Laura was relaxed again. "Every time I think they can't have more or bigger explosions during a movie," she giggled, "I see one with more and bigger." "I know," laughed Buck. "Pretty soon the only thing left to show will be the Big Bang." Laura found that comment so entertaining she almost didn't notice when Buck casually slipped his arm around her shoulders on the way out of the theater. At his touch, she stiffened slightly and pulled away, hoping he would think she was just being playful. His hand slid down her arm. Soon his fingers were locked in hers, gently but firmly, and he would not let go. She stopped moving, their arms a bridge between them. Laura glanced down nervously at their joined hands, then up at Buck. He was looking intensely at her. "Buck, she began falteringly before he cut her off. "Look, I know you think I'm a dork right now," he said quietly, "but I like you a lot, and I think one day you're gonna like me. I just have to do the right things." "Maybe, but let me finish," Buck insisted. "This is the last time you're gonna hear this from me. The next time you hear these words, they'll be coming from your mouth, and you'll be talking to me." Laura found his tone creepy, but something about it held her transfixed. "I'm yours if you want me. I'd do anything for you." Buck stared right into Laura's eyes. She stared back, nearly hypnotized. Then Buck broke the spell with a bright smile. "There," he said, releasing her hand. "I'm not going to be pushy about this. Next move is up to you. Until then, if ever, I'm your buddy. That okay with you?" Laura shook off the effect of his words. They were enthralling, but it still wasn't right. He was not for her. But for now, if he could keep to his word, a friendship might work between them. "It's a deal," she said, forcing a smile. Then she thrust out her hand. Buck shook it gladly, and when they were done he let go, and side by side they continued toward his car. About 20 paces away, Buck stopped short. "Oh, no," he muttered under his breath, staring ahead. "What?" Without answering her, Buck sprinted ahead. When Laura caught up, he was circling Wilma, looking down. She saw what he was looking at and gasped. All 4 of his tires were flat. "Well, it looks like I'm finally being officially welcomed to town," Buck said bitterly as he kneeled beside his car. Laura knelt down beside him. "Have they been slashed?" she asked. Buck was probing the tires with his fingers. "Don't think so," he replied cheerlessly. "But we'll find out when AAA gets here." He rose and started to walk away. Just as he did, something shiny under the Datsun caught Laura's eyes. When Laura saw what it was, she gasped. Quickly, she grabbed the small object, shoved it into her pocket, and stood back. Buck was walking away determinedly, and he had not seen her. Laura ran to catch up with him. Buck was sullen, his hands thrust into his pockets, obviously trying to contain his anger. Laura felt for him. He had definitely been targeted, and based on the object Laura had just discovered, she knew who the culprit was. She toyed with the idea of telling Buck, but ultimately held back. She'd seen enough of Buck's temper to know that silence was the key for now. Buck called AAA, and by the time they arrived and had reinflated his tires, Buck and Laura could have seen another movie. Silence rode shotgun during the trip home. It wasn't until they pulled into Laura's driveway that Buck spoke. "I hope I don't find out who did that," he said quietly as he turned off the engine. "Whoever it is better hope not to." "It wasn't that bad," Laura told him optimistically. "If they had been slashed, that would have been really bad." It was the wrong thing to say. "It's one thing for you to sit back and let people trash you," he practically roared at her. "But I'm not going to take it. I'd fight your battles if you'd let me. But I am not going to run away from my battles for you." Laura was pressed against her door in fear. Okay, she said quickly. "I'm not telling you what to do." "Good," he said ominously. Then his eyes widened as if he had come to a sudden realization. He took a deep breath and got a hold of himself. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I'm really angry tonight. I didn't mean to snap at you." "It's okay," Laura said. She was lying, but they were the words that would get her into her house in one piece. With the crisis over, Laura thanked Buck for the fun evening. Thankfully, a goodnight kiss wasn't on Buck's agenda. He gave her a strained smile and a wave as he backed Wilma out of her driveway. It was now after midnight and the house was dead silent. Laura knew Shelby and her mom must both be asleep. Laura headed straight for the phone and dialed a number. It rang twice and was answered by a familiar voice. "It's me," she whispered into the receiver. "I thought you'd call sooner or later," boasted Chester on the other end of the line. She could just see his smug face. "So I got sooner, good girl." "What's your problem?" she nearly yelled, infuriated. "You leave me alone!" "You didn't tell him, did you?" he asked, already knowing the answer, and enjoying it immensely. "No," she said, now almost regretting that she hadn't shown Buck the class ring she found under his car. It was Chester's. She had recognized it instantly. It was the same one he had given to her when they had started going out, and the same one she had thrown into the deep end of the pool when she broke up with him. "You can keep it if you want," Chester said. "Then we'll be going steady and can live happily ever after, if you want Bucky Boy to live at all." "What are you saying?" Laura asked, her voice quivering. She was beginning to wonder if the accident had caused Chester brain damage. "Let's just say," Chester postulated, "that next time it may not be his tires that'll have the air let out of them." Laura couldn't take it anymore. "Why are you being like this?" she cried in full voice. "Do I mean that much to you? If I did, you'd let me be. Or are you just upset about Allison? I can understand that." Chester snorted derisively. "Allison? You and I both know she got what she deserved." Laura nearly dropped the phone in shock. "You need help, Chester." I only need what I want. It's you that I want, and you that I need." Then the line went dead. Chester had hung up. Laura fled to her bedroom, making sure each window was latched shut and her door was locked. When she finally attempted sleep, it did not come easily. Every time her eyes fell shut, the echo of Chester's ominous words made them snap open again. What was happening with Chester? He sounded so lethal. Laura remembered that the police questioned him regarding Allison's death. After tonight's conversation, Laura took no comfort in the fact that Chester had not been arrested or charged. She checked the door and every window latch again, all locked. But Laura still did not feel safe. Chapter 9. The next morning, Laura awoke, surprised to find she had slept at all. Chester had frightened her, and she had still not shaken the menace of his words. Pulling on a robe, she went to Shelby's room and knocked on the door. Shelby was awake, sitting up in bed reading. "How are you feeling?" Laura asked as she entered. Shelby just shrugged. "So-so?" she sighed. "How was your date with Buck?" "It wasn't boring," Laura began. "That's for sure." She related the events of the evening, from Rain and the burger bug incident, to Buck's vow to avenge his tires, to Chester's maniacal behavior. "I hope you enjoyed the movie at least," Shelby deadpanned. "Stop it!" cried Laura, giggling nonetheless. "I'm worried. On top of all of this, Doug says he has to talk to me. About what? I don't know, but by the sound of it, it's important and probably not good. And I still have to put on a happy face when I go looking for work, though I have applications just about everywhere by now, so I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do next." "I know a place at the mall that's got an opening," Shelby said with an evil little grin on her face. "That's not funny. I already got that from Buck yesterday." Now she was angry. It wasn't like Shelby to joke in such poor taste. Shelby immediately said she was sorry, and Laura easily forgave her. "I guess it's follow-up visit day," she sighed. "Rest up," she told Shelby as she rose to leave. "And wish me luck." This day of job hunting was no less disappointing than all the others. None of the businesses to which Laura had previously applied had any job openings, except, of course, Fair Warning. By midday, Laura was so frustrated she actually found herself driving to the mall to apply for the position left empty due to Allison's murder. Unfortunately, the store was closed due to the murder investigation. Standing at the glass partition that closed Fair Warning off from the mall, Laura stared into the empty store. She found the three-way mirror in front of which, according to the papers, Allison had been hanged. On the right wing of the mirror, Laura could see dark smears. Pressing her face against the partition, she could tell the smears were brown or dark red, dried blood. Laura pulled herself away from Fair Warning. She did not want to see any blood, let alone the blood of a murder victim she knew. Had known, to be more precise. She felt ghoulish, knowing she had been ready to take advantage of another person's death that way. Shame drove Laura home, where she found a note from Shelby. It read, "Laura? Feeling lots better. Thought I'd get some air. Phone messages. Buck called a couple times from the hospital. He said call him ASAP. Doug called once, but said you won't be able to reach him until later because he's working at the Appleby Mansion. So he'll call you back. Another round of hang-ups as well. What's up with that, I wonder? Hope the day went well for you, and I'll see you around dinner. Shell." Laura put down the note, glad that her sister was feeling better. The rest of the note, however, had brought her down, way down. Buck had called. She dreaded the day when he might find out who had vandalized his car. And if he ever found out that Laura had known it was Chester to begin with, he would feel betrayed. Laura was afraid of what both boys would do to each other and to her if she ever told Buck the truth. Then there was Doug. He had something on his mind, and she was certain it was bad news. She couldn't take any more bad news right now. On the other hand, maybe he could help her figure out what to do about Buck and Chester. That buoyed Laura's spirits a bit. If he could help, then it would be easier for her to deal with whatever Doug was worried about. She didn't like trading bad news for bad news, but it was better than letting the same old bad stuff just fester. Echoing Shelby's words, Laura wondered what was up with all those answering machine hang-ups. For her money, she guessed that it was Chester calling to harass her. Laura hoped he would stop trying. She didn't want to call the police, but after last night, especially with Chester's comment about Allison deserving to die, it might soon be her only recourse. Laura shuddered. The phone rang. "I've been trying to reach you all day," came Buck's frantic voice. "Where have you been?" "I just got in," she told him. "What's wrong?" "Got some news about your friend Chester today," he told her. "What?" Laura's blood froze. He had found out about Chester and the tires? She braced herself for his anger. "You know when the police brought him in the other day?" Buck asked, sounding excited. "I found out they gave him a blood test." "Why would they do that?" "To see if his blood type matched that of some blood they found at the scene." Laura remembered the dark smears on the mirror. A small tremor traveled up her spine. "Wouldn't that blood be Allison's?" "The thing is, Allison was hanged, not stabbed or anything. She didn't bleed at all, so it must be the killer's blood." Frightened of the answer, she asked, "So, was Chester a match?" "I don't know," he said, "but they did let him go." Buck was obviously disappointed he could not pin blame on his nemesis. But there are two weird rumors going around. One is that a message was written in the blood they found. What the message was hasn't come out yet. The other isn't really a rumor, but an odd item. remember Warner Hulbert, the guy from the accident?" "Yes, did they ever find him?" Laura had completely forgotten about the headhunter's disappearance. "No, he's still missing, but they pulled records on his blood type as well." That certainly was odd. What could he possibly have to do with Allison? "Don't know that either, but the hospital is buzzing from all this, and I had to tell someone. You were the only one I could think of to call." That reminded Laura of a question she had been meaning to ask. "What do your old friends think of the excitement here in Springwood?" Laura could almost hear Buck raise his walls of defense. "What old friends?" he asked warily. "Where you used to live." "Oh, I don't have many old friends," he said, almost daring Laura to ask about, to pry into, his old life. But Laura dropped the challenge. After a moment of awkward silence, Buck asked, "By the way, speaking of old friends, if you knew who had let the air out of my tires, you'd tell me, wouldn't you?" Laura tensed. The jig was up, or maybe he was just trying to trap her. Hoping she had not paused too long, she said, "No one I know would do something like that." Then, to keep it from being a complete lie, added, "None of my friends, at least." Buck seemed to weigh her statement carefully before responding. "That's what I mean. If it was one of your friends, would you protect him?" Him? So he did suspect someone in particular, and he suspected her of shielding that someone. She still thought her lying would save all of them a lot of grief. "It's Doug, isn't it?" Buck said suddenly. Laura's jaw dropped open, though Buck couldn't see it. She spoke through her shock. "No way! That is completely not the way Doug is." "Are you sure about that? I've heard some things." He let his voice trail off meaningfully, but Laura could only laugh indignantly. "Right, like what? And from whom? Chester?" She almost told Buck at that moment who had really sabotaged his car, but his wild accusation was so infuriating, she resolved that if Buck wanted to know who was responsible, he'd have to find out for himself. "Listen, Buck, Doug is one of the nicest guys I know, and one of my few real friends." She emphasized real, hoping to bait him a little. Laura wanted Buck to know that he couldn't just waltz into town and presume to be that important to her. Buck didn't take the bait, however. Okay, he said. "I may be new here, but I read people pretty well. This doesn't necessarily mean he was involved last night, but I don't think Doug is quite who you think." "That's right. You are new here," she retorted. Okay, whatever you say. I'm just looking out for you." Laura just rolled her eyes. Buck was totally off base now, and as far as she was concerned, it was past the 9th inning and the stands were empty. The game was over. "I have to go now," she told Buck, for once not trying to conceal her displeasure. "I really blew it, didn't I?" he said quietly. "You ain't just whistling Dixie," she said humorlessly, and hung up. As Laura expected, the phone rang again mere seconds after she had hung up. The first few times whoever was calling, Buck presumably, hung up as soon as the answering machine picked up. Sure enough, Buck finally left a message. "I don't know if you're listening to this, or you've gone out," he said in a humble voice, "but I'm sorry I upset you. It's difficult enough to make friends in a new place without trampling all over their feelings. I guess I'm the proverbial bull in the china shop, in that sense, but I hope you understand how I feel. Besides you and your sister, no one else has been too friendly to me. And then to be attacked like that last night." His voice had started to become tinged with sadness. Suddenly he stopped, took a deep breath, and spoke more forcefully. "Sorry, I was starting to whine. Anyway, bottom line is, I value you as a friend. I've worked hard to get to this point, and I'll work even harder to get you back. You say jump, I'll ask how high. Until then, I'll improvise. Call me when you're not mad." He seemed about to go on, but then just said goodbye and hung up. Laura immediately erased the message. His plea was impassioned and even sounded sincere, but it deserved no immediate response. Buck was too mercurial, always acting or talking before thinking, then justifying his questionable actions. It would be interesting to see what he'd say after a few days of silence. How would he react if his standard line was rebuffed? What tune would he be whistling then? By dinner time, Shelby had still not returned home. This worried Laura. She had no idea where her sister was or with whom. Normally, Shelby included where she was going, usually the library or the hobby shop, in her note. Laura found herself looking out the front window, watching for her. So when the phone rang, Laura pounced on it like a leopard. "Shelby?" "Nope, Doug." Laura exhaled in a low whistle. Where was Shelby? "Is something wrong?" asked Doug. "Oh, not really," Laura replied, feeling a little silly. "Shelby went out this afternoon and hasn't come home yet." After a pause, Doug told her, "She's fine, I bet." But he didn't sound too convincing. "You're no help." "Sorry," he said quickly. Then his voice brightened measurably, if somewhat artificially. "I'm sure Shelby's all right, but I didn't call about her, I called about you. You haven't had dinner yet, have you?" "No, I'm waiting for Shelby." This time, Doug seemed truly cheered. "Great. Come out to dinner with me tonight so we can talk." "I can't just up and leave." Laura glanced out the window once more. The street was still empty. "Sure you can. Shelby did. And if she did, she's saying she can take care of herself, which means she can worry about dinner herself tonight." "I don't know." "Unless you have other plans," Doug said, trying to sound nonchalant and utterly failing. Laura knew what he meant, other plans with Buck. Well, that sure wasn't the case. "You're right, Shelby can deal." Doug was elated at her decision and nearly hung up on her in his excitement to pick her up. "I'll be right over." "No, you won't," Laura told him promptly. "You have to give me an hour to get ready." Doug readily agreed, and they hung up. Shelby would be proud of me, she thought. I'm making a boy wait. Of course, it's not like he's a potential beau or anything. It was Doug, after all. But it was always good to get in a little practice. Still, Laura took only a half hour to get ready and was glad when Doug showed up 15 minutes early. In all that time, there had been no word from Shelby, but by then Laura had accepted that her sister was capable of taking care of herself. And besides, she was probably just at the hobby shop and had simply neglected to mention that in her note. So Laura just added a small note of her own at the end of Shelby's. "Out to dinner with Doug. Be home later. Laura." Laura didn't notice how nervous Doug was acting until they began rumbling down the street in his car. She also didn't notice that they were being followed. "Where to?" she asked. "Jaguar?" Then a horrible image of last evening's six-legged snack popped into her head. "Please, let's not go to Big Game Burger." She didn't want to tell Doug what had happened. It might just sound like sour grapes to him. "Nope, I got a surprise for you tonight." He then turned and gave her a perplexing smile. She wondered silently what Doug was up to. He obviously wanted her to ask, but she felt too tired to play an active role in a guessing game. Doug turned back to the road, which quickly led them through town. After a few turns, they reached an almost rural section of town where larger, older houses were separated by vast lawns and wooded areas. More and more often, the driveways were actually long dirt roads. It was down one of these dusty paths that Doug drove. Trees formed a thick canopy overhead, blocking out the sky. Dusk was approaching, and Laura suddenly felt as if they had driven into a cave. Doug? Laura gulped. Where are we going? With the same mysterious grin as before, Doug said, We'll be there soon. It's a surprise. The dirt and gravel path wove among the trees for what seemed like miles. Laura could not tell where they were, but she knew they were far from any restaurants, or people for that matter. Why was Doug acting so strangely? For no particular reason, Laura's paranoia returned. Buck had said that Doug wasn't who she thought. What could Buck know? He was the stranger, not Doug. The voices seemed to fight for space in her head. Why are you so nervous? They asked. You've been nervous since the accident. Allison's murder upset you even more. You remember, there was a message written in blood, and it was written with the killer's blood. And you noticed that Doug has a cut on his hand. Laura gasped, and for the first time realized what she had seen when Doug came to pick her up. There was a bandage on his index finger. The message had been written in the killer's blood. They had kept driving out of town. They were miles away from civilization now. What's wrong? Doug asked, noticing her silence. I have to get back home, was all she could think of in reply. Doug frowned, then smiled. You kid her? Like you'd let me bring you out all this way and then make me turn around. He chuckled, evidently amused by Laura's presumed joke. Don't worry, we're almost there. Laura could say nothing more. She stared at the gauze bandage wrapped around his finger. A spot of blood had soaked through. The message had been written in the killer's blood. Okay, Slashaholics, this has been chapters 8 and 9 of Freddy Krueger's Tales of Terror, Help Wanted by David Bergantino. Once again, a lot of stuff to unpack here. No deaths tonight, but a lot of detective work to do. Wow, man. Buck is one sick puppy. This guy is all over the place on the emotional, spectrum here. Honestly, I didn't think he was the killer because he actually showed up at the scene of the crime shortly before she was killed. And I still don't think he's the killer, but I think he is a psycho that might be capable of killing. I just don't think he's the one that killed Allison or the one possessed by Freddy. But yeah, that guy's a sick puppy. He's definitely a sociopath or a psychopath, one or the other. It's like he's trying his best to feel real emotions. And the only one he's really grasping is anger. Maybe that's the only thing that makes him feel alive. I don't know. Yeah, Buck is just one sick puppy here. Chester, I don't know. He was the ex-boyfriend, and that, like a trope in the slasher movies, horror movies, like Scream and stuff. Usually it's not the one that gets arrested and stuff. But then again, in the first Scream movie, it was the guy that got arrested first and let go. So maybe I ought to think about putting Chester back on the list of the short list of killer suspects. I just don't feel like it's him. But I'm gonna put Chester back on the list with Shelby. And I'm going to get to Shelby in a second, because there's something definitely going on with Shelby, too. And the more and more this book goes on, the more I'm suspecting her. I don't think it's going to be Laura. I don't think she's going to be unwittingly finding out she was possessed and killing people. But Shelby keeps acting strange. She had it even said she had an evil smile when she mentioned there was a job opening, at the mall where Allison died. And then she left a note and she's been gone all day, and it still hadn't come back by dinner time like she said she would. I don't know. There's just something really suspicious going on with Shelby. I'm going to have to see how things play out more, but for now she's staying on my suspect list. And Doug has become a possible maybe. I don't know what he's up to driving her out in the middle of nowhere, but that cut on his finger and the blood, it could be a red herring, could be a bloody red herring, or it could be evidence that he killed Allison. Apparently he's got a lot more feelings for Laura than Laura realizes, and maybe Buck, even though Buck seems a little unhinged, maybe he knows something's up with Doug because one psychopath can see another psychopath, or sociopath. So maybe he does know there's something fucked up with Doug. Maybe Doug is possibly the killer. I love how, if you're listening, David, I love how you've crafted so many different possibilities that it's hard to pinpoint it. But right now, Doug's on my possible maybe list. Chester is on my main list with Shelby. I'm thinking it's one of those two. I thought about maybe Rain because she put like the roach in the burger and stuff, but I don't know. I don't feel like this is going to be like a, Billy Loomis's mom from Scream 2, like a character who has a very small part that ends up being the killer. I don't see that. And I have a feeling Rain's probably going to die at some point. So yeah, for right now, I'm sticking with my guns. It's either Chester or Shelby, and Doug is a possible maybe on there. Buck may be a killer, but he's not the killer. Not the. I don't think he's the one that's possessed. But yeah, I cannot wait to get back into this to find out what Doug's up to. I can't wait to find out who's following them. Is it Chester? Is it Buck? Is it Shelby? And where did this old man go, the headhunter guy? We heard about him again, but he still hasn't been found, or we haven't heard he's been found. I want to know more about Buck's backstory. I'm hoping we get some more of that. The way Buck unloaded on her tonight, and the way he, screaming at her outside of her house, whew, that was crazy. So yeah, I really enjoyed these 2 chapters. I hope you did too. I'll be back very soon with more of Help Wanted. And we're going to unravel this mystery and get our last guesses locked in. Probably 2, most likely 3 more uploads of this book. So in the next upload or 2, we really need to lock in our final answer before the conclusion. So let me know in the comment section what your guesses are. Like I said, possible maybe is Doug. I got to see what happens here when we pick back up with Chapter 10. But for now, I've got Chester and Shelby on my short list of people I really think could be the ones possessed. Let me know what you think. Click the like button. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. Hit up the Patreon page, guys, and the merch store. You'll be supporting the channel and keeping the channel going for a long time to come. I can't monetize the videos to make ad revenue because of the copyright content and stuff, so I depend on you guys to keep the channel going by joining up on Patreon and shopping at the merch store. Be excellent to each other. Pleasant dreams! Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. And if you've got a little extra time, check out the show Slash Tracks on the channel here. It's like Mystery Science Theater 3000 with a horror twist. We do complete movie riff commentaries. Starting with episode 6, we really embrace the whole Mystery Science Theater aspect. We have a masked villain on the show named Master Evil. He's the one forcing me and my co-host Alex Vanover to watch these bad movies. Sometimes we include the entire movie with the episode. Sometimes if we can't include the movie due to copyright reasons, we let you guys know when to hit play on your copy of the movie, so you're queued up with our riff commentary. It's very funny, all comedy once we get to the riffing, and it's a lot of fun. The movies are always bad, and we have a lot of fun with them, and I think you will too. If you do watch an episode that doesn't have the movie included, check the description, because I will include a link to either the movie, where you can watch it for free, along with and then you can queue up with our commentary, or I will include a link to where you can watch a version of the episode with the movie included with our commentary all in one video on Google Drive. That way you can see the whole thing without it affecting the YouTube copyright things. Hope you guys enjoy it. I would love your feedback on the show. Like I said, episode 6 is where we really hit our stride and the show became what it is now and what it's going to remain. Before that, we did a couple kind of serious, half comedy riff commentaries for Jason X and Freddy's Dead. And we followed that up with riff commentaries to Ghoulies, Ghostbusters 2016, and Troll 2. But those had we did the whole riff commentary thing and let you know when to hit play on your copy. But starting with episode 6, we had the whole wraparound segments at the beginning and end of the show with Master Evil and him letting us know what we're watching that night. Then the riffing happens with the whole movie, if we can include it. And then it ends with Master Evil letting us know what's coming the next time, stuff like that. Lots of fun on these little comedy bits, and I think you'll enjoy the show if you'll give it a chance. Episodes 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 are all available on the channel. And check them out. Episode 11 is coming out in just a few days. And I'm going to end the upload here with the intro, the animated intro and theme song for Slash Tracks to give you an idea of the vibe and humor of the show. I'd appreciate it if you check it out. Hit the playlist section up here on the channel. There's a playlist for all the episodes of Slash Tracks so far. Alright guys, see you next time.
When Master Evil comes to play and Mother says that it's okay, Alex and Josh are stole away and made to watch these movies to stay alive.